Oh, little birdie, spring has sprung! Out with the old, in with the new. Like trading in the big store for Dollar General. You'll get the same big store savings without the big store hassle. And with no hike to the store, you're even closer to the name brands you love. Like fresh, tastic Gain detergent. It's spring in a bottle, people! Stop by Dollar General before Sunday, spend $15 on Gain-scented items, and get 5 off your next trip. Dollar General, it's the fast way to save.
Blog Talk Radio.
Peace and greetings, everyone, and welcome to Civil Alert Rising. This is your host, Sind Asha, here broadcasting live and direct on this Thursday, August 22nd, live from the Estados Unidos, America del Norte. I thank you, like always, for being in, for your feedback, comments from Facebook, emails, everything in the calls. I truly appreciate your attentiveness and the eagerness to keep on diving in to get the truth, because you know that's what Civil Alert is here, to bring the pieces of the puzzle and the keys and to address a lot of the hidden history, hidden politics, and the truth about who we are as a people. And, of course, in doing that, we also have to always address the truth behind the spirituality, metaphysics, the truth about commerce, as well as with dealing with health. So, you know, this is always a full circle show. Tonight is going to be another good discussion and a historical point of introspection, along with history and jurisprudence in regards to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship with Morocco. And I will start off by saying that, you know, the ancient word for Morocco is Amerruk'a, and that's A-M-E-R-R-U-K. Again, that's A-M-E-R-R-U-K. And to discuss the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Tarik Bey as well as Abdullah Bey are present, and I'll be bringing them on in a minute. Before starting, I do want to make point that we are going to be referencing the treaty book that Taj published. If you all have that, I'll give you a moment to go and to pick that up, to be referencing that. Also, too, we'll be looking at the supremacy clause within the Constitution, and that is Article 6. And also, too, we'll be looking at the brochure. Actually, this is a trifold, and it's the Republic Truth versus Democracy Fraud. So if you all have that in hand, I will give you, obviously, if you don't have that in hand, I'm going to play a little bit of music to give you time to get everything together so that you can come on. And we'll be back in one moment. And for everybody that's coming in the chat room, make sure to dial in direct to 858-357-8450. Again, that's 858-357-8450 if you have any questions or comments or concerns. And then you can press option 1 at 11:30. The live stream ends if we go a little over. Just be mindful of that, and you can call in direct to the line. So, all right, and again, this is Silver Alert Rising, and we'll be back in one moment. All right, and we are back. Before I bring on Abdullah and Taj, I do want to let you all know that the fourth wave of the Mortgage and the Foreclosure Boot Camp will begin on September the 14th. Again, that's on September the 14th, and if you want to get more information, you can go to civalalertradio.com/bootcamp. Again, that's civalalertradio.com/bootcamp. And then you can also send an email direct to publicaffairs@civalalertradio.com. Again, that's publicaffairs@civalalertradio.com. If you have any questions, you can call me at 404-944-2072. Again, that's 404-944-2072. As well, if you have any questions about the boot camp on Mr. Fix-It, you can call me direct or send an email to publicaffairs@civalalertradio.com. And also, too, I want to let you all know that next month we're going to have a new class that's going to start on Thursdays, and I will give you the official dates, and it is with Taj, and it's focusing on the Constitution annotated. I have to tell you all, when I started looking at the annotations to the Constitution, it really gave more of a thorough, clearer focus historically as to what was happening, as well as taking into account that when the Constitution is used, it is interpreted as it was during its inception. So definitely stay tuned for that. I will be sending out an email blast. If you want to get added on to that mailing list, you can pretty much just send an email direct to publicaffairs@civalalertradio.com. In the subject line, just make sure you put Constitution annotated so that I know to add you onto the mailing list, and it's going to be a hot one. There are a lot of classes that I see that was necessary, because it's one thing to do shows and, we only have like the 2 hours and there's not any visuals. So it's one thing to have a discussion on air, but it is a whole different ballgame with dealing, with the online webinars and having the materials available and going through things so that people can have time to see, because when it comes to learning, you learn by hearing as well as seeing, and then actually, actual application. So, a lot has been revealed over this past 12 or 13 months, as I always share with you all, and I see more than ever it is important to look at all of the law and all of the different angles and aspects. So, definitely September is going to be a very hot-packed month and moving forward. So, and I'm pretty sure you all had time to get all of your tools out. And was looking at the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. One thing that I was speaking to Taj about was that there's been certain cases where I've heard stories where people would mention the treaty, and some of the magistrates would say that the treaty does not apply. So tonight we're going to go in and talk about how the treaty is connected and serves as the foundational history of the land here, especially with focusing on the Constitution for the United States of America. We're going to talk about the letters, the diplomatic political letters, the exchange between the Sultan as well as between the writings from George Washington. And you have to excuse me if I seem a little stumbling a little bit. I've been reading so much over this past couple of weeks, and I was thinking about one of the diplomatic letters that I actually read where Henry Clay was actually in communication direct with the Sultan as well. Maybe some eye-opening things in that. And then also, too, we're going to look at the more detail as far as like the differences between the republic and the democracy, and this will be very telling as well, with the focus on looking at the Soldier's Training Manual And there's a couple of key things within the King Alfred plan. And some may say, like, okay, well, why would this be discussed? Because in everything that we're doing, at the basis of it, even when it may appear as if people are not utilizing the Constitution is being enforced and utilized in all situations, because it is through the Constitution that the laws of the United States become applicable, past obligations, as far as like the Northwest Ordinance of 1787, dealing with the Articles of Confederation, Articles of Association, as well as this treaty. So without any further delay, I am going to bring Taj on and Abdullah.
Islam.
Taj and Abdullah.
Islam.
Islam. Islam. Welcome, brothers. I'm glad to have y'all on. How's everything?
Good. Yes, great. So, well with you? Islam, brother Abdullah? Islam, brother. Taj. Can't wait for that book. Yeah, I'm on it. All right.
Oh, yes. And you know, Abdullah, I know you hadn't been on since the parade, so feel free to give us a update or a follow-up on everything.
Yes, I definitely want to give a great shout-out to Subordinate Temple number 4 in Indianapolis, Indiana, who were instrumental in helping me organize activities out there and setting up the helping organize where we will be positioned on the day of the parade. I had 4 brothers who assisted me and 2 brothers who took pictures for me that will be put in my book. I'll put about quite a few pictures in chapter 1 of my book. That book is Moorish and Masonry, and hopefully we'll have that done before the end of the year. And I've been working very hard to get that done. So that's Subordinate Temple number 4 in Indianapolis, Indiana, that were instrumental. That's Subordinate. That's Assistant Grand Sheik Tenon Bay. Yeah, the Grand Sheik, Graves, Brother Graves. And then you also had the Grand Governor of the Indiana Temples, William Ward Bay, who assisted me out there.
Oh, right.
So, so on the day of the parade, they were, the parade actually, there were European Shriners from all over the country there in the various processions, wearing Moorish fezzes with Moorish names embroidered on the fezzes, representing the names of the various temples that they belonged to. And while I was Ustreaming the parade, European girl was with her mother, about 5 years old, and she said to her mother, "Look, mommy, they're wearing the Shriner's hat." So she's been this little European girl has been socialized into thinking that and relating the Shriner's hat to herself. But actually is not the Shriner's hat, it's the Moorish fez. So she actually refers to the Moorish fez as the Shriner's hat. So this is what the Europeans do. They actually have groomed their children into claiming our culture, our Moorish fezes, and our regalia. And they have these annual Shriners parades in different parts of the country. And this year was in Indianapolis, Indiana. And so this was the first time I actually attended the parade, and the reason I went there was to take pictures for my book, and I'm looking forward to getting this book out so that I can share that with the general public. So it was so I want to thank you for that opportunity to give me that plug for the parade.
You are so welcome. I noticed on that live stream that it seems like, too, a couple of the elders there, they were asking you some questions, especially like there was, I think, a couple of men that were like in a pickup or something, and they were pointing to something. I think you were trying to explain to your logo or something.
They were pointing to my logo, my Moorish silver letter logo. I had my Moorish silver letter shirt with my logo, and they asked me what am I wearing, what is that symbol, and I explained to them and the logo is an open book with the and with embodied superimposed in the Moorish fez, and on each side of the page there is the compass and square. One side I have phi, the word phi, and actually the symbol phi, as well as the number, the irrational number 1.618. There's with the golden section or golden mean. And then on the other page I have pi 3.14, and the symbol for that. So I actually explained to them, so that, and I explained to them that putting masonry in the proper perspective of geometry and astronomy. And so I had to demystify, and this is why I actually had Josh, who actually laid out my designed my logo, and as well as laid out my website, so that I can demystify masonry. When people think masonry, they think they think spookism. They have got a connotative understanding. They give a connotative meaning of Satan, devil. Now understanding philosophy that's connected to those symbols, and also imagery, which is actually ancient. And so that limited understanding of masonry, of blood worship, human sacrifice, anything that doesn't deal with uplifting fallen humanity. So, as I said many times on this show, that you can have fire, a match, and that match can be used to heat up a room, to cook food, to start a fire to cook food, start a fire to heat up an area, or you can use it to burn down a house. So it's actually the intention. So it's not, the energy is not evil. It's the person. It's the intent. So we've been groomed, to think that energy is evil. So it's just different frequencies. So once you understand that, you can actually begin to tap into those various frequencies, and once you increase your brain frequency, brain wave, you can actually manipulate it and control it for your benefit, or to uplift fallen humanity, or to keep fallen humanity oppressed. But it's not the energy itself. It's actually the actual individual intention on how they use it or misuse it.
Exactly. So I guess that's going back to that whole correspondence on the Wizard of Oz, where they had the Wicked Witch of the East. No, what was it? The Wicked Witch of the East, and then the Good Witch of the West. Yes,
the Wicked Witch of the Wicked Witch of the Wicked Witch of the West, of the East. How did it go? Is it the Wicked Witch of the East? I think it was the Wicked Witch of the East. Then we went over that one on one of the shows.
So yeah, that is something that's excellent. Now, before we jump into everything, and I don't know if we had did this like on the last show when we had did it about the secret about the Shriners and Darren KKK when all you were on. But can y'all just give everybody just an overview of how did you all meet? And the reason why I bring this up is because when I was looking at some old YouTube videos, I think these had to be from probably like early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, look at this. This is Abdullah and Taj here. And then, of course, I remember back then you were talking about the Moors Order, the Roundtable. And from speaking to, you, Taj, Hannibal, I've heard, even with the bear talking about the Roundtable, I heard so much was going on during that time. So if y'all could just give everybody just like a history of how you all even connected.
Well, that video is from La Unique Bookstore in Camden, New Jersey. That was in 2004. In 2004. But Taj and I met Taj at Jimmy's Barbershop in Camden, New Jersey on a Friday afternoon. He was wearing a brown suit, dark brown suit, and he walked in with his Moorish fez on. And I remember Friday because that's the day he had roundtable classes at the time, 2 days a week, Friday night and Sunday afternoon. And I attended, and he told me about the roundtable class. Prior to my meeting, I'd already, his cousin, Jamal, had introduced me to Moorish science and Moorish knowledge, and Judge Todd took me to another level. Todd invited me to his house where he held classes that night, so I attended. So that's how we met. So it was a Friday in October 1993. It was a Friday. I can't remember what week it was, but it was actually a Friday, and it was in October 1993.
Wow, that is something. And Taj, can you share with everyone how did you come up with the concept of doing the M.O.O.The, the Roundtable, and what was going on during that time period? Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I had previously, years ago, when I was younger, I came into the Nation of Islam, and within a 6-month period, that was in the Camden area, Temple number 10. They used to call it Muhammad's Temple at the time, before it became Muhammad's Mosque. And I learned a lot, of course. And I noticed that they would always mention Noble Drew Ali, but when you would ask any detailed questions, everybody sort of got like either secrecy or like they had crazy glue on their lips. Mm-hmm. Logically, with myself being a reader and a researcher, as you know, I've had a library since I was like 7.5 years old. So I always read and always sought knowledge, etc. And so the more and more I would do research on Noble Drew Ali, the more difficult it was to find any what you call grounded information. And as you already know, and that was around like the 1967 area, and of course we didn't have the common access to the general public of internet at that time. And so I would go to libraries and things like that. I did get a little bit of information, but very piecemeal. After a while, I left the Nation of Islam, and I chilled out, continued to do what I did. I've always studied and always had some information even before I went into the Nation of Islam, and I would have little classes and stuff I would do with my children and with neighbors and stuff like that. In about 1982, I came into the Moorish Science Temple of America via supports and instructions that was given to me by Sister Daria Bey. And it didn't take me long because it's quite a long story, but basically I found a typical pattern that I found in both, the churches, also in the Nation of Islam, and after a while, even in the Moorish Science Temple of America. And that pattern was, it appeared that when you get closer to the truth, very often the leadership gets upset. And I noticed that pattern because I pay attention to details. After a while, I recognized that if I was going to continue to expose some of the truths that I found over the years, I would have to get out from under the jurisdiction of someone else's control. And it's on that principle that I founded the Roundtable in the year 1982.
1982. That's something. So when you first started, was it a situation where the majority of the people that started coming, they were kind of privy and was just needing additional details, or was this just like a total fresh, clean slate with dealing with the people in their mindset at that time?
Well, actually, it was a thing where I was doing little class sessions, mostly with a handful of individuals here and there, but mostly for my children. And I wrote stuff for my children, little booklets and stuff like that. And I started producing, like minor stuff. But I always had notes. Now, of course, when I was young, when I was like from the second grade on, I always wrote poetry anyway, so I always had poetry. That was always a hobby of mine. And the matter of fact of it is, actually, Brother Abdullah encouraged me to share a lot of the books that I had produced for my children, actually, with the public, which actually is a foundation. Brother Abdullah and, of course, my son Hannibal encouraged me to share it with the public. And this is the Moorish American Heritage Series, upon which the M.O.O.The or the Roundtable books are published. But again, like I said before, that basically is a synopsis. Of course, there's much more detail, but I don't want to waste a lot of time on that. But that was the general synopsis of it. And of course, it evolved into recognizing how, like I said earlier, when you start getting closer and closer to truths about the human condition, very many people who you would expect to support those truths, who are in positions of authority or administrative authority, would get upset. And it convinced me, actually with lessons I learned earlier, that many of these people are not as genuine as they purport to be, but more intentionally in control of people's lives and gravitating to the point of making themselves little godheads and actually living off the people like leeches under the guise of Jesus, God, Allah, whichever names that are applied to the divine principle that they may use, or whichever ones that the people may be adopted to, just like different flavors of ice cream. And so in the nature of the Roundtable, it is to address a lot of those fundamental Gnostic and cosmological truths and historical truths that I noticed that many others were conveniently, or for whatever other social political reasons, ducking or diverting or skewing or hiding or shutting down, etc. And so that culture became a sort of like a calling card for the Roundtable.
I see. As you are talking, first thing I want to say is that is so good how you were saying that, how Abdullah had pretty much encouraged you, was telling you to publish, because I was just telling Abdullah earlier that he is really, I always tell him he's an invoker, and he's very supportive, and I love that about Abdullah. And with you too, with Taj, because I remember when I had reached out to you in regards to looking for someone to go over etymology, you were like, oh, you got to call Dooley, because up until that time, I was like, okay, I hadn't spoke to Abdullah, so, I appreciate that and that vibe and that synergy and that energy. And with this, in mind, with looking back at the whole essence of it being in 1982, can both of you all speak upon what's going on a metaphysical dimension when you have the surge of energy and the like minds and you're bringing this stuff to the table, and how that energy literally permeates and it's spreads and creates a resonance, even if it's not in your immediate area? Because I've been thinking about that date, I'm like, okay, 82, I was very, very young, and 93, that's when I was just getting out of high school. But still, like all throughout that time period, I could recall knowing that it was something hidden and not being told in the schools, but I just never had the proof. So if you all could just talk about the metaphysics of that, and the reason why I'm asking you to talk about that is because in some cases, people may feel like if they don't physically see all this action and activity going on, that the mind state and the consciousness and that things really aren't shifting or getting, or things are turning for the better.
Well, when you look at in order to really look at metaphysics more properly, let's make this statement. Mm-hmm. The masses have been deceived mostly by the priesthood and those in administrative power deliberately, callously, and selfishly being their motives. The masses, for the most part, have never been given religion, just the same as the masses have never been paid since about 1933, and most specifically since 1964, due to the secret Treaty of Verona and the mission of the European occupiers of the Western Hemisphere, with their mission of stealing all the gold and the silver and sending it via England to the popes of Rome under their secret Treaty of Verona, including all the suffering, the genocide, the mistreatments, etc., that goes with it, which has been falsely labeled under false education as racism, which is really Inquisition operations. Back to a fundamental principle, it's important for people to understand that just like the people have not been paid and they have counterfeit as that's being used as money, they also have dogma, which has been substituted for religion. So religion has been maintained amongst the priesthood and amongst those who belong to secret societies, including Masonry, etc. And the truth of religion being Gnosticism, the philosophies of Gnosticism, yoga, and, of course, cosmogony, including the fact that for the Bible, Quran, M.O.O.The, and those books, those Torah, the holy books, the so-called, be read properly by the masses, they must be taught what the priesthood is taught. And the priesthood knows that those books cannot be properly interpreted if it is not comprehended by the reader, that they're all Kabbalistic in their character, in their entirety. And therefore, they must have a knowledge of the Kabbalistic alphabet, or what you call the Kabbalistic alphabet. And that Kabbalistic alphabet is referred to commonly amongst the people as the Hebrew alphabet, or what you call the Hebrew alphabet. Now, all priesthood, all imams, all rabbis, all ministers know this, but as you already know, and I'm assuming, and I think rightfully so, that most of the listeners are not made aware of that or are not aware of that. However, if the priesthood told them that truth, logically the priesthood would be immediately moved out of the way due to the fact that they would lose credibility. Of course, that credibility that they don't deserve in the first place means that most of them are liars and thieves, pretending to love Jesus, God, Allah, etc., but they're really in there for their selfish selves. So let's go from the truth of the metaphysical prescription of what's really going on. So you're looking at from the beginning, if there is a beginning, because man, for that which begins must end, but man, time never was when man was not. As long as we've been on this planet, the foundation of the culture on the planet is cosmology, the study of the universe, study of the stars, etc., the positions of the stars, the reflections of those stars in both chart and in their geography, or in their general placement in positions above the earth of the southern and the northern hemisphere, is the basis upon which we laid out the grid work for navigating on the earth, as well as the cities, the towns, the country, states, etc., are based on cosmological placements of the stars repeated on the earth, and also the measurements of the stars. That is the basis of our philosophies, period. And also you'll see the symbol of the compass and the square being used to make the radii or the circle, and the square being that for making our conduct square, and the circle to encompass our passions, but also using archaeology using buildings and laying out the groundwork or the geographical layout for farming, etc., architecture, and reflected also in the character building, which is called masonry, with the building of character. And so in truth, we're looking at the placements or the energies that the stars have in relationship to life on the planet, including our lives, etc. And according to the principles of the ages or the millennia, we're coming out of the Piscean age into the Aquarian age. And in the Aquarian age, it is sort of like in that article that Noble Drew Ali wrote about religious controversy, where the sun stands at high noon, and the people cannot see yet the sun stands at high noon. What it means when it stands at high noon, there casts no shadow. And so that means no thing will be hitting. And so the area that we're coming into now cosmologically is the Aquarian age, and therefore no thing shall be hidden. Out of the constellation of Pisces, from which we are moving, it is built on the principle of I believe. Yet in the constellation of Aquarius is built on I know. And thus, while we're looking at the astrological placements of the stars, the sun, the moon, the ascendant of the individual, where we may look at the calculations of the making of each of us from the womb of woman to determine the map. We must look in the millennia or in the age period to look how humanity itself has moved. And so you always look at the position of the constellation of Aquarius, and so in Aquarius, all things being shown, commanding that I know, and the energy that's projected on the earth by Saturn, etc., which is referred to sometimes as the Reaper, sometimes as the Great Teacher, etc. So that means from a karmic perspective, what we produce, the checks that we have written, what we do and what we do not do, which is also referred to as karmic, meaning that all checks that we've cashed or checks that we've written must be cashed, etc. And so as far as the dynamics of people coming into this knowledge and this sweeping across the earth with the energy that it is, look at the principle of cosmogony, which is the truth of religion, and then you recognize that it is the time cosmologically, therefore does not recognize person or station, and the humanity will be moved just like a large broom, even against their will.
I see.
You there?
Yes, we're here.
All right. If you look at there are different cycles that we measure, that our ancestors measured. You have a larger cycle, 25,920 20-year cycle is called the Great Year, and which is divided into 12 ages, which is a 2,152-year cycle. You also have a 500-year cycle, 40-year cycle, 19-year cycle, 50-year cycles, and these various cycles have an effect on the vibratory rate and frequency of the Earth. The frequency of the Earth measured as a 7.83 hertz, what's called the Schumann resonance. If you look at the movie Superman, it's called the movie The Man of Steel. And before I go into that, let's look at the musical scale. There was a concerted effort by the corrupt Masons, Eastern Stars throughout the world to change the ancient musical scale to what you know as a modern musical scale today. What our children learn, what's taught throughout in different parts of the world, a modern musical scale. What they did was they reduced the hertz. The ancient musical scale actually will activate the DNA as well as the Kundalini energy in pineal gland. So then going back to if you look at in the ancient musical scale, you have C at a 528 hertz. So if we apply the ancient musical scales, you can actually increase the vibratory rate of humanity. And going to the movie The Man of Steel, check that movie out. The emphasis is on the number 33. 33 is a master number. But we're going to look at 33 in relationship to the frequency of the Earth and the Schumann resonance. As I said, the frequency of the Earth vibrates at a 7.83 hertz. In the movie The Man of Steel, those from Krypton were trying to take over the Earth, but what they had to do was change the frequency of the Earth to measure to match the frequency of Krypton. And there was an instrument that they used, booming it down from Krypton, and boom, you actually see they were actually changing the frequency of the Earth so that they could actually live on Earth. Superman in the movie is 33 years old. So I'm like, 33. 33 is a master number dealing with the frequency of the Earth. So this is why the number 33 is used in the United Nations. We had the 33 graphics in the United Nations seal, or bridge rather. The number 33 used. You have the 33 vertebrae, but the 33 dealing with the frequency. And then and as well as the musical scale. And when you have a shift, a change in the age, or you also have looking at the different holidays and their different energies that occur during the different time periods of the year, it actually has an effect on the vibration of the Earth as well as the vibration of humanity. So looking at that, understanding our ancestors knew this very well, and so we actually left signs behind. And the information is never lost. The information is coded in the measurements of statues, in the measurements of the layout of cities, in the measurements of the distance of different astronomical markers. They call different temples of different buildings, and you actually do what's called metrology. And you actually do a distance measures in a particular area, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You actually do a meteorological study of the different ancient temples in a particular area, Hindustan, Egypt, Mexico. You actually begin to see that those numbers match our astronomical reference points. So the knowledge isn't lost. This is why the compass is square. This is why the Europeans, Masons, use the compass square on the buildings, because the compass is square with the G in the middle. It symbolizes that philosophy of measurement, geometry meaning earth measurement, and understanding that astronomy and cosmology is what we use to build civilization. That knowledge, the ancient time, reckoning time was the number one major area of study in ancient civilization, because you got to know what time it is in order to be able to chart your destiny. And this knowledge is used for practical knowledge, practical areas of study, and agriculture. Because knowing when to harvest, when to plant, and also knowing when climate change would occur, when there will be great floods in a particular area of the world, so that we can actually move masses of people. And the fear is going to come because the masses don't have this knowledge. Those who rule have this knowledge. And so this has dealing with how to chart time to guide your destiny. The clock of destiny is that zodiac. And it's the clock of destiny, because you can measure, you can determine your destiny by using that compass square and calculating the time for weather patterns, knowing when to plant, for every activity of human life. This is why that compass square is a pivotal symbol in ancient civilization.
And as an addendum, yes, and and all over the world, they would different nation states, even though they have their Sayaraha chambers also, astrological chambers, they would mail to Washington, D.C. to get ephemeruses, an ephemeri, and that's a star chart that's used by all governments around the world to navigate, ETC, which is, again, the foundation of cosmogony, foundational principles of the operative measurement or placement star charts, ETC, and that's how things are run on the planet. And it's actually that part of the root of what is known as Moorish science. Now, due to the corruption of many of the administrators and leaders, including the Romans, they themselves use it for their selfish selves, and they hide it from the masses. And this is the basis of their mental slavery that they use across the planet. There's another reason why Noble Drew Ali told the Moors to go back to the state of mind of our ancient mothers and fathers, because as soon as you do, you will discover these truths that are spoken to you at this time.
I see. And, you know, and thinking about the whole thing with the science in regards to the geometry and the measurement, let's segue into the furthest land in the West, located at 48.1667 degrees north, 100.1667 degrees west. The continent now that's now known as North America, that has so many names, of which Morocco or Amerruk'a is.
And it's referred to as the Maghrib, Morocco, the most extreme west.
Yes. So the area where the sun sets.
And it's also the name that's given to the continent, the ancient name, the Temple of the Moon and Sun.
Yes. So with that in mind, and looking at the science, can you, Taj, please elaborate a bit about how and why it has been hidden that this is the real Morocco? And where did the switch occur? I shouldn't say the switch. So when did the disorientation take place?
See, there's no, the whole concept of the real Morocco, because actually it extends from the northwest Africa on the east side across the Great Atlantis, including North, Central, South America, including Mexico, which you will also find references to that in chapter 47 of the Circle 7 Quran. Now, also, when you're looking into the Bible or you're looking into the Septuaginta, etc., all of that is in reference to the dividing of the land between Him and Cush as a code, which means father and son. And as the father simply means the elder of us, because actually the systems of government are matriarchies. So that's not to be confused with the papacy styled order of the patriarchal principle of competing men and women against each other, and whereas the priesthood are all masculine. So it's not to be misunderstood that all ancient cultures are actually matriarchy, and so there's a balance. But when you look at the Great Super Devere, that's the dividing of the land between the Father and the Son. That was before the Great Earthquake. And when you go into ancient history, you'll hear them make terms about ancient Mu and Pan and Atlantis and part of the land being under the water now. That's in reference to the Great Earthquake. And so you see a physical separation today of the land mass that did not exist in past generations. Are we clear? So it must, people's concepts must be clear when they're talking about what's the real Morocco. It is simply, when you're talking Morocco, it's only more of a modern term of what you call Marrakesh or Amerruk'a, etc. The ancient land of the ancient Moabites, when the land was divided between Father and the Son. And so you're looking at actually what you call an ancient surveying of the land. Now, any of your ancient and modern scholars, and particularly with your more modern scholars, they don't even have to do what you would call any really in-depth research. They will immediately find artifacts, writings, tablets, stone heads, and other artifacts that have not rotted with time within the earth in the Western Hemisphere that clearly indicate that the Moors were here for not just a few hundred years, but actually multiple tens of thousands of years. And logically, a lot of that information, though known, is suppressed by both European scholars and by both compromised Asiatics who prefer to call themselves the Christian brands of blacks and Negroes, which are brands who have been compromised, and they get drafts or what you call stipends to do books to promote the black brand and the Negro brand, etc. So it's not in their interest to dispense that type of information because it totally dismisses the so-called black diaspora, and logically it would immediately prove that they're compromised overseers. However, any scholar knows that the people that they call the ancient Asiatic Africans have been all over the planet for millions of years, less, more, hundreds. And the Europeans, who are a modern-day hybrid, didn't bring us from anywhere. As a matter of fact, he's the Negro, and he's black. Black is Middle English, word that comes actually from Old High German, and in its original form means pale anyway. But again, to promote the fraud, many of the people have promoted the brands and convinced our people that they were black on top of it, convincing them that it's a complexion, when actually a complexion slash identity, when actually it's a brand that was used to make the people not descendable. However, again, the issue of the Asiatics, or Asiatic Africans being at the North Gate, Central and Old South of Africa, is evidence is all over the place. It's only merely suppressed. And anyone that's honorable already knows that, which means, again, it's almost like that even though the Europeans have spent over 300 years burning books, there's still enough information left that will dismiss that argument very quickly, and that you're indeed at Morocco. Also, when you look at the United States law, any serious law dealing with the United States concerning citizenship, any serious law, etc., within the context, you'll see the name Morocco within it anyway, which is in reference to the true name of the country. And yet the United States is a political metaphor and not the land, must be distinguished from that. This is also why you see a lot of scholars always try to make people think that the United States is the land, when the United States is actually a private for-profit religious corporation belonging to the folks of Rome that is claiming a de facto jurisdictional sovereign claim at Morocco. Of course, is de facto and a fraud. And this has much to do with the corruption of the politics in the Western Hemisphere, and of course with the war machine of the popes that's been used from North America for world conquest purposes. However, the Maghreb, Amerruk'a, North America, Central America, South America, and the adjoining islands. Islam, you have the floor.
Sister, if you look at give people some references showing, proving our ancient presence in the Americas, North, Central, South, and Central America. There's a book that I've referenced on the show in the past called Unexpected Faces in Ancient America by Alexander von Botnov. Unexpected Faces in Ancient America. If they go to my website, MoorishCivilletter.net, MoorishCivilletter.net, and click on go to the photo gallery, they'll see all of the photos that's in that for Unexpected Faces, and they will clearly see they'll see artifacts, the stone heads, terracotta artifacts with broad noses, thick lips. There's another reference, ancientamerica.com. Ancient America magazine came out in the 90s, and so you go to Ancient America, and they can actually get past magazines on CD-ROM. So there's Europeans, Wayne Mays and Frank Joseph. Wayne Mays is the publisher. Frank Joseph is the editor of the magazine, Ancient America. And they actually have conferences in the Midwest. So there's Europeans who actually have done a lot of archaeological research of the ancient artifacts, and particularly in the area, the Moorish landmass that the general public has been indoctrinated to call the United States. They have in the magazine, the various magazines, Ancient America, you'll see pyramids found in Ohio and New York, Atlanta, Michigan, and so forth. There are artifacts and different all over. And then another reference, they came before Columbus by Amerruk'a. They came before Columbus. He actually was inspired by the works of Alexander von Mortenau. And there's also older National Geographic magazines, 40s, 50s, and 60s, that have articles referencing archaeological finds in the Americas. So those are very, very good sources that I actually reference and use. And there's different talk shows that I've been on, and I actually be referencing that in my book, showing documentary evidence of our ancient presence in the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, yeah, because those photos and those images are telling. And then also, too, Taj, basically what you were saying, like in the records, where you would see that at the root of how there were different, like, variations of the spelling of America, what I'm noticing is that throughout, like, the late 1700s to about the mid-1800s, that I always would see Amerruk'a, Amurrica, and that when Bush was in office and everybody was making fun of him, saying that, oh, he keeps on saying Amerruk'a, and that was like the biggest joke. And they kept on, talking about that. The different news reporters were speaking of that and looking to see how Amerruk'a was heavily used up until that Reconstruction period. When I think about it, I said, oh, Bush knew exactly what he was saying. And then I also noticed, too, is that with the, in the Berber tongue, how it would say, I would see Amerruka, and then sometimes it would be Amurruk, Amerruk. And then it took me to, like, the Amerruk'a kingdom. And then with all of this in mind, and I have to ask you all, with looking at the term Africa, during the Reconstruction period, when they mention Africa, during the time of the 13th Amendment with the 20 sections in 1864, when the term Africa was used, were they speaking of Africa as we know it today, or Africa in regards to land in the West? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I noticed that in the book Atlantis, The Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly that was published in the 1800s. And by the way, y'all, I want to tell you, if you go to a thrift shop, you can order it online, but sometimes the thrift shops, the Goodwill, Salvation Army, you can get old copies of these books for like sometimes $2 and $3. And with looking at that book, there's a paragraph in there where it talks about Africa. And I just want to read it, and then from there, if you all could give me your take as to historically, when we're looking at these documents, are they talking about Africa from this perspective or Africa in modern-day terms? It says here, and let me see which page number this is. Oh, boy. Let me see here. Okay. It says here the Fomorians were from Atlantis, and they were called Fomoraic. Fomoraic Afriaic, A-F-R-A-I-C, and Fomorra, which has been rendered into English as Fomorians. They possess ships, and the uniform representation is that they came as the name Fomoraic Afriaic indicated from Africa. But in that day, Africa did not mean the continent of Africa as we now understand it. Major Wilford, in the 8th volume of the Asiatic Researches, has pointed out that Africa came from Apar, Afar, Apara, or Amerruk'a, and that Amerruk'a is A-P as in Paul, A-R-I-C-A, terms used to signify the West. And I'll repeat that. Major Wilford, in the 8th volume of the Asiatic Researches, has pointed out that Africa came from Apar, Afar, Apara, or Amerruk'a, terms used to signify the West, just as we now speak of the Asiatic world as the East. When, therefore, the Fomorians claimed to come from Africa, they simply meant that they came from the West. In other words, from Atlantis, for there was no other country except America west of them. So, and I have to share with you, Taj, remember when you were down back in last year in February, and when we were all in the office?
Yes.
I had this book on my shelf, and sometimes, I'm pretty sure that, since you all are deeply having into study, how sometimes you get so many books, sometimes you don't even have time to read everything, but you got to get it. So that book was on the shelf when you were there. And I had so many other things that I was doing and reading, I had never got a chance to get to it. But several months way later after the fact, one late night when I was in the office, I was looking and reading, and I said, wait a minute, they're mentioning the Moors in here. And then it was like months after that, that's when I saw this. And so with thinking of this, since this was heavily published and out in the 1800s, and I specifically remember around the time when I first met you and had a chance to speak with you, you always placed the emphasis on the Reconstruction was not only about what was going on with the land and the slavery, but it was the reconstruction of the history. So with all of that in mind, historically in a lot of the government documents, are they speaking of Africa in this context?
Yes, and look at this. Let's keep something more contemporary that most people can easily find. In your war records and in modern history, when making reference to documents in Europe and in the Americas, you will find when you go back to the 1800s, 1700s, that Africa and Moor are used synonymously. Again, affirming what you just said earlier, because they're related actually to one sequential identification. And not just to country states, but the people of Asiatic African descent are referred to in your records, historical and political records, when you go back to the 1700s, 1800s, as Moor. So African and Moor are used synonymously. This is another reason why it's important when you're dealing with the current issue of jurisdiction of land or inheritances of North America, while the Moors who have been disinherited under European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere, why their political forum today is Moorish American.
I see. And so with this in mind, like when we see that, what is it, the 20th section, if my memory serves me correctly, of the 13th Amendment, and saying that that the people or descendants of Africans can never become citizens of the United
U.S.
States.
citizens, yes. And there's a political basis, a valid and actual factual fundamental principle supportive argument when people understand, because since the U.S. corporation is essentially a guild of European nation states, etc., doing business at Morocco, as well as carrying out their conquest intent at Morocco, logically, people of Morocco can't be U.S. citizens.
Right.
That's like saying, you know, the Asiatics who were forced to slavery are Europeans. And remember, in order to with their intent of covering up that fraud, which is one of the motivations, amongst others politically, is why the Europeans put their family names on the Moors of North America, so that whatever the Moors would buy or sell with the mark or the number of the name, they, by their own action, would be transferring their entire estate back to the Europeans who are actually occupying them. This is another reason politically why you have the motivation of European conquerors and actually inquisitionists from Europe pretending to be Americans today and altering books and claiming to be Americans when they're actually Europeans, in order to deceive the descendants who would be heirs of the estate and muddy the waters of the issue of inheritance and estate and right to the land and resources when these people would finally begin to wake up, which has much to do with the dynamics today, where you see Europeans that have been occupying Americans claiming to be Americans, and they're not, and they're Europeans because they're trying to still claim the land.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, again, it's important to have an understanding of the political social engineering use of the brand names Negro, Black, Colored, Indian, West Indian, and why the Europeans took on the title of white, which is a legal status, so that they could claim to be the sovereigns of the land, and then convince the people who were miseducated by them, thinking that white and black are in law are references to complexion when they're actually references to social status.
Mm-hmm.
Let me, I'm going to read an excerpt of his letter, which will be in my book, M.O.O.The and Masonry.
Mm-hmm.
I've had this letter since 2005. This letter was actually written in 2000. Atlanta County Office of the County Clerk, Michael J. Garvin, County Clerk, year 2000. 5901 Main Street, Mays Landing, New Jersey, 00330-1797. He actually is responding to more documents that Moors in that Moorish area of the Moorish territory was actually submitted to be filed and recorded in Atlantic County in the year 2000. He writes, please be advised that the Atlantic County Clerk's Office has accepted documents from individuals claiming status as members of a free sovereign state other than the United States, in particular from individuals claiming to be a private de jure, lawful and divine being, indigenous free sovereign Moor, by birthright free holds inheritance, a noble of the Moroccan Empire, being part and parcel of the Great Seal government. Those are direct quotes from the Moorish documents. Those are Declaration of Moorish national status, You also had the tax non-obligation forms. There was actually 4 documents that was filed. That's actually, those documents are on rvbaypublications.com. And those documents was filed in 2000 by several Moors whom I know. I actually found out who the Moors are who actually filed the documents. And actually, when I did the presentation in Pleasantville in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So I read that to say this, that the general public does not have a proper concept of what the United States is. If you go back, if you look at the Federal Reserve note, on the back of the Federal Reserve note, you have one seal. One seal in the back of the Federal Reserve note, and the word one is between. It's a misrepresentation because people will think that it's 2 seals there because it's separated. But it would be proper if it was displayed on a coin, so you could get the proper concept. If it's displayed, displayed on a coin, you have one coin with 2 sides. The word one indicates that there's a connection there. So it's one seal. The great seal is the pyramid in the form of a national government seal. The eagle is the subordinate. So we've been conditioned in European schools under European colonial jurisdictions that the United States is the sovereign government, and the United States is the name of the landmass. So in this letter, Michael Garvin, the tone is as such that they're claiming to be citizens of a free sovereign state other than the United States, which is true. But keep in mind that the United States is a European occupational colonial government, and not the name of the land and not the government. The name of the government is Morocco. So those who actually filed are citizens of Morocco, which is currently under European occupation by European occupational colonial government, United States. We have to be very clear on that. So the United States is not the government. It's a European occupational force. If you go into occupational forces, they're an occupational government. And there actually are rules dealing with that and how the occupational government forces are obligated to assist the sovereign state, that being Morocco, in aid. And if you look at the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Child, the rights of the indigenous people, where it states that the colonial states are obligated to assist the sovereign states in regarding clothing, food, shelter, and they're actually being violated. Now, we the Moorish transfer the Moorish government into the hands of the European occupiers. Now, the European occupiers have violated that trust agreement. They have transferred the government, the Moorish government, into the hands of international bankers. We didn't tell them to do that. So, as we speak today, the international bankers have control of the Moorish empire, and so you have these European Masons who are trustees who were put in place as trustees of the Moorish state, have violated the Moorish trust agreement, and so this has to be viewed in the proper light. So Masonry for the Europeans is that they are custodials of the Moorish estate. Masonry for us is that we're the founders and we are the sovereigns of the Moorish government. This is the Moorish government. I was explaining to a brother the other day from Missouri, Moorish territory, where the European colony called Missouri operates. I was explaining to him, he asked me, can his European friend, be a citizen, all right, be naturalized? How can his European friend be naturalized you know, as part of the Moorish government. And I said to him that the Moor, that his European friend is already a part of the Moorish government. Keep in mind, the Moorish government has a dual national seal, the pyramid and the eagle, currently under occupation. So the Europeans are a part. The power to naturalize is a sovereign power. But because we transfer more sovereignty into the hands of the Europeans are operating in our stead and are naturalizing Europeans. But that power belongs to us. So that European is already a part. It's being very clear of what that obverse and reverse seal is. So that is very clear. And going back to the reference of Africa, looking at, again, proving that they were referring to this landmass, is that going back to the unexpected faces in ancient America, showing that they did not transfer us from anywhere to here. We have an ancient presence here. Oftentimes we have to mail, the concept home for our listeners so that they can really see what they have, that there is clear evidence, archaeological evidence of an ancient presence here dating back thousands of years, that we actually built civilization. In the upper Great region, we excavated over 500 million tons of copper in the upper Great region, lake region. There are underground cities, pyramids. There are cities that we built civilization. What was taught in the textbooks, the problem is when people pose questions, they're coming from a European reconstructed historical perspective of that's been implanted in the mind through textbooks. In the textbooks, history textbooks that actually used in European-controlled schools, they have Moors living in teepees, and they call Indians, and what that represents is nomadic. Teepees represent nomadic, no permanent settlement, and so that concept is fixed in our minds of wilderness, teepees, no permanent settlement. So they covered up the occupation, the archaeological records, proving that we actually built civilization. We actually with pyramids, with cities, with underground cities, with passageways and so forth. So this has to be covered up. So they created this fictional history of a wilderness, no civilization, and they came here to build civilization. They were explorers. This false concept. During the 15 and 1800s, during the same time period of the so-called transatlantic slave trade, we were seizing this European ships. Portugal, France, Spain, the Netherlands, England, Germany. There was political relationship between Morocco and those European countries. We seized hundreds of their ships. We also seized hundreds of thousands of Europeans during that time period. They covered this up. The political motive was to maintain occupational rule over our land. So some people would say that the reason why the Europeans cut up the history was to show that the Europeans were superior, to show that the Europeans, that we didn't have anything. No. The motive is land, to maintain control of our land, because they indoctrinated us to believe that we came from another landmass 400 years ago by way of ships. So the motive has to be to maintain occupational rule over our land. Millions of Moors who are classified in the United States Census Bureau as Negro, color, black have no knowledge that we are aboriginal, indigenous to this land, Morocco, America. So we are not in the mental state as a masses of people to reclaim our land because we don't know that it's our land. So as long as that exists, that mental state exists, that gives Europeans further mandate to have occupational rule of our land. M.O.O.The in 1913 began the process of restoring our consciousness and restoring our sovereignty on land by calling us to national attention. So in order to put us back into mental capacity to reclaim our land, we have to first correct the status issue. So Drali said, come on, ye Asiatics of North America, and learn the truth about your nationality and birthright. You're not Negro, colored, black. He told us who we're not and told us who we are. Gave us a clear focus and direction of what our status is. I yield the floor.
Yes, Islam, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. And with looking at all of this in mind, the initial treaty was signed in 1786. Is that correct?
June 1786, yes.
Okay. Now, with looking at some of the signers, I noticed that, let me see here, one of them, a couple of the names prevalent, it had Muhammad, and that was M-A-H-O-M-E-T. Let me see here. I'll give the titles and everything on that, the other titles. But just making mention of that because what I noticed is that in 1735, there was a chief or Sakim of the Mohegan tribe by the name of Muhammad Omen, and I'll spell that out for everyone. It's M-A-H-O-M-E-T. Again, it's M-A-H-O-M-E-T, and the last name was W-E-Y-O-N as in Nancy, O-N as in Michael, O as in October, N as in Nancy. And from what I was reading, it said that he actually had traveled to England in 1735 to petition King George II for better treatment of his people, and that he was the great-grandson of Uncas, which is U as in unique, N as in Nancy, C as in cat, A as in apple, S as in Sam, and it stated that Uncas was the founder of the Mohegan tribe. Now, with looking at this, what I see when you go back in the older books, again, prior to Reconstruction, on old maps, it does not say Mohegan. Sometimes it has Mohican, and then in older maps it'll say Morrican, M-O-R-I-C-A-N. And even in, like with the maps and in writing, they're very open. The scholars back then, of which some I noticed that are even esquires. You have to apologize if I don't have my whole reference list here because I didn't even know I would be going here with this. But, you know, with speaking with Taj and Abdullah, they have this power of invoking and pulling things out. So, like with looking at this, how can I say this? When the treaty was actually signed between the Sultan and the representatives of the United States, and when the letters were being submitted, are they referencing the body, just as in like 1735? It clearly has here Muhammad, being the chief of the Morocans, which is now known as the Mohegans, talking about the better treatment, the human rights for his people. So with looking at that, was most of this exchange really happening here, but through reconstructive history, they have everybody thinking that as soon as they see Muhammad or Muni, Mule, and things of that nature, people are automatically thinking like, no, with those names, they had to be overseas. And I think this is key to highlight this is because I said, look at this. All throughout all of this history, they never mention a chief, a sakim, a sultan over a tribe right here in America with the title of Muhammad. Taj or Abdullah, if you could just elaborate on that in terms of if everything really happened here as far
Yeah, they don't want people to make the association because remember, one of the major sociological engineering properties of the secret treaty of Verona and the Christian Black Code is to disconnect the people from the land to create mental disassociation. Logically, though, that's very important from a political war perspective because in order to disinherit a people, you have to destroy their reference points to make them not descendable. And in reference to that, in its social-political relationship, everybody is encouraged to discover or to encouraged to examine and study the law of trust and the law of the state and thus trust in order to understand the motivation because when you look at the brands Negro, Black, Colored, Indian, you look at the Europeans putting their family names on the Moors, etc., like Brother Abdullah was saying, their motivation is to under de facto position claim the land and deny our people the capacity to make a reclamation on their lost estate, starting with the fact of causing them to be misclassified with their own cooperation by not recognizing from a legal perspective why the brands of Negro, Black, and Colored were put on them and why Smith, Jones, and Johnson names as the Europeans have adopted them were put on the Moors, all of which from a law perspective makes such persons colored or what you call artificial in their activity and thus not descendable because they will be declared incompetent in totality. And relative to one who is to receive an inheritance, they would be referred to as being non-descendable. So again, like Brother Abdullah was saying earlier, you have to look at the political agenda of the Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere to recognize the motive. Yield the floor.
And Abdullah?
What I'm doing in my book, Chapter 1, Moors and Masonry, is showing the correlation of time of the diplomatic and political activities between Morocco, us, and the various European powers between the 15 and 1800s during the time period of the so-called transatlantic slave trade. And clearly showing that during that time period, major activities, European countries actually shifted their political, economic, and naval policy and by virtue of being, because we were seizing, they were European, they were actually different European companies and agencies that would actually develop ransom, were actually collecting finance to pay for the ransom of their family members. Mm-hmm. As we seized hundreds of thousands of them. They would capture us. But I'm referencing this because it would be impossible for the Europeans to have transport us from what is now known as Africa to the Americas because they were not in political power to do so. So they covered it up. When I mention in the schools August Butenhoff, Cyrus Griffin, those are two presidents of the Continental Congress. They are clueless as to who they are. What's the political motive? Why aren't the members of the Continental Congress taught? Their names are not even known by the students. Why? Because during that time period of the Continental Congress, there were many political activities from 1770 to 1787, and even before that, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, the negotiation process took a period of 10 years. That Treaty of Peace and Friendship was important for Europeans. Today it's important for us because the sides have been reversed. But it was important for Europeans because they could not maintain the tribute payments. It was customary for European countries to pay annual tribute to Moors. They would rather pay us tribute than to fight. It was either pay tribute for protection, pay tribute or receive their ships. There were bays and days who actually seized the ships anyway, seized the entire crew. This information is not taught in the schools at all. You got ransom lists, you have ship logs, ship lists that have been suppressed. The question is, why? What's the political motive of suppressing this? To come up with a story of transporting 10 million people from one continent to another. And so we buy that story because we don't have the facts. So once you start correlating these activities, putting this information into the public eye, give them a different view of it, analyze the so-called transatlantic slave trade story in the context of the diplomatic relations between Morocco and the European powers during that same time period, and you will clearly see that the Europeans were not in position of power to do that. We were seizing their ships. We were capturing hundreds of thousands of them. There were companies that actually paid ransom for them, but this is not known to the general public. There are European writers. I came across in our research at least 30, 40 books written by Europeans. Charles, a professor of Ohio University, Davis, he mentioned that there was probably 1.25 million Europeans that were captured by the Moors in that time period of the so-called transatlantic slave trade. This is Europeans. So Linda Dowley, N-O-D-O-L-L-E-Y, in the 1970s, she was professor of Yale University. Her male co-workers attacked her verbally. They attacked her verbally because she wrote the book called The British Empire. And what she did was she actually researched hundreds of thousands of narratives, European narratives, who were captured by the Moors, and they actually, they talk about their treatment, the ransom payments, family members who were trying to pay for them. But why did her European male co-workers attack her? Why was she verbally attacked by European male co-workers? Because they don't want this out. See, they don't want, because it will cause us to look at the so-called transatlantic slave trade differently. See, that's the motive. See, the motive is to maintain occupational rule of the land. We've got to get that across to the listening audience. And they suppressed that. So the African scholars have written that the motive is the Europeans want to show their superiority. No. The Europeans want to maintain occupational rule over Morocco, this land right here, America. That's the motive. And if you talk anything other than that, you're already off the subject matter. The subject matter is land. That's the subject matter. And they maintain the history to maintain that, and they cover up important facts that will actually clearly refute this transatlantic slave trade story.
Mhm. Yes, thank you for bringing that to the table, because there's an air of energy that are trying to get people to think like, oh, when you're nationalizing, you're nationalizing with Morocco across the water. I have heard that from a couple of lectures. I'm not going to put any names out, but I'm just saying, when this vibration is coming out like this, it's either one, they're not connected to the true history, or two, they know the true history and they're trying to keep the people disorientated.
Yes.
So that they won't start grabbing all of these keys and then putting all of the pieces of the puzzle together. And, you know, yes, and Taj, you know, you made a good point when you said that even though there's been tons of burnings, if the people go and look in so many places, this information is still out for everyone. And, you know, we're taking time to lay out the foundation of the treaty, and this, you know, part 2 will be on next Thursday, so that you all can pretty much go in, gather these keys, do some study, and then you actually know what you should study, as opposed to us being general and saying, you know, just study, study, study. Now you know you have some keys and some things that you can use to assist in the discovery. Another thing, too, was looking at this lays the groundwork for writs that people would use, or complaints, if you all are deciding to move forward to bring suits in regards to denationalization, bureaucratic, forced assimilation, miseducation, birthright theft, and it's cheating.
Yes.
This recording alone can be attached as an exhibit to whatever it is that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, it is so time out for people that don't even belong here to be all across the land to continuously to keep on infringing upon the people's rights, our people's rights, even if they're people that are not Aboriginals. Still, it's all about humanity, but especially with dealing with us, it is time out for that, and all of these truths need to be put out as much as possible. We do have let's see here, we do have
questions, chat room, callers.
Yes, we do have one. Caller 313-850. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from, and your question or comment.
Islam, Santasha.
Islam, how are you?
All right, it's Bantu calling from the Detroit territory, northwest of Mexico. How you feeling?
Oh, all is well. It's AG. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Just wanted to call and say I'm really loving this show, the last couple shows, where they got into nationality, the specifics, the details, provided a lot of clarity for me. And you were absolutely right this evening when you talked about giving us keys to study versus having to hear study, study, study all the time and not kind of knowing where you need to focus your attention so that you can better defend yourself and be able to make points of reference to other people when you're having discussion. So I want to thank you for that. But my question to Brother Taj is, no problem. My question to Brother Taj is are the incorporation papers for the United States posted anywhere so that they can be downloaded and viewed and or studied?
Yes, the last incorporation was around 1925, and you'll find that posted on rvbaypublications.com.
Okay, I know that you have quite a few sections there. Any particular section, or is there like a search box? I haven't seen one where you could search.
Look on the left-hand side and look at the categories and go through them and open them up. And then, as you already know, a lot of those little spinners are actually other doors, too. So go through it because it is so vast now. Immediately, I can't tell you, but just keep looking and you'll find it.
Okay. Also, this is for Brother Abdul. Probably I'm going to be working with my children quite shortly. I have 2 7-year-old daughters, and I wanted to get them into studying etymology a little bit. So I thought you might be able to give me some recommendations on how to achieve that.
Yes, go to my website, Moorish Civil Letter, MOORCIVILETTER.net, and I have an etymology page, a semantics page, and a grammar page on that. Also, take my phone number, 215-300-5471. You said they're 7 years old? 7, and what's the other age?
Yes, they're 7.
Both. All right, 7. All right. So, and also give me a call.
All right, I appreciate that, and thanks again, Natasha.
All right, you're welcome, brother. Have a good night. Islam.
Yeah. You too. Islam, peace and love.
Peace and love. Caller 707-334. Welcome to Civil Alert. Please take your name. You're calling from Islam, brother.
This is Brother Bay calling from California. How y'all doing?
Very well. How you doing?
Good. I have like 2 question comments. The first one is, Natasha, on you were talking about Sheikh Mohammed, that he had to go to the King George of England to petition him for mistreatment. Now, was he petitioning for mistreatment of King George's subjects? Because I know at that time Morocco already had treaties with Britain, so they already have a treaty in place. So if he's going to petition him for mistreatment, I mean, did the article say, like, who was he petitioning on behalf of?
Oh, he was petitioning on behalf of his actual tribal people, the Moors here. Yes. And what's interesting about this is that it is stated that, and I verified this by looking at some of the records from Britain, that when he went over there in 1735 and 1736, towards the end of 1735 he went over there. But in 1736, he so-called mysteriously passed away from smallpox. And they had a commemoration of and had a memorial that was dedicated to him in November of 2006. And Queen Elizabeth II at that time dedicated the memorial to him. And they had it published all over the BBC and everything in regards to this. And it's funny, too, that a couple of the, I shouldn't say so-called, but the representatives from the Mohegan tribe, which is really the Moorish, historically, of course, you know, they didn't look anything like us. They were albino Europeans over there in Britain with their feathers on and everything at this memorial honoring Muhammad.
Wow.
So, yeah. But you can, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, you can finish up.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. My second comment was, regarding all the ransom payments. I had read in C.M. Bay's Clock of Destiny book, he was talking about that when he mentioned, like, the Ishmaelites, and Noble Drew Ali said the same thing with they had to pay heavy ransom payments. So one day I was looking through the War Department records, and I noticed that they were paying annuities to, like, all these, native tribes that were here in North America. Is that kind of in that same vein?
So was that for Abdullah in regards to the ransom payments, or?
Yeah. Like, I saw that they were paying, like, annuities, to, like, annual payments and tributes to all these tribes here, and that was in, like, the U.S. Department of War records. Is that, like, related to that same activity that was going on?
You said, is it related to the kidnapping that was going on?
Yeah, like tribute payments for using land or kidnapping. Is that like all in the same, commercial activity, I guess?
Yes, I want to make sure I'm understanding and following you. You're saying that the tribute payments were being made to different Native American tribes here?
Yeah, I saw like records in the Department of War records and it was saying like it was just like tons of like annuity payments being paid out to various tribes. So I'm wondering, is that related to that same? Is that like a memorialization of some of that same activity that was going on?
Oh no, no. When you're looking at those annuity payments, you're really actually talking about back to the issue with the Treaty of Peace and Friendship and the Europeans' constitutional sanctions of doing business here. They're actually supposed to do percentages, something like 60-40, and therefore finance will be put aside, and that's really what's happening. And plus, they hide a lot of that and also limited what you call payments to a few hybrid tribes in order still to hide the information and to hide the real history, because actually their annuity payments are supposed to be made to the Moors in general across the country.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for clarifying that. Islam all, have a good night.
All right, Islam, brother. Thank you for calling. All right, we have a couple of more callers here. Caller 757-749. Welcome to Silver Alert. Please state your name and where you're calling from, your question or comment.
Islam, this is Dewan Burden Hill, calling from Seneca Moco, corporate area known as Virginia.
Islam, brother.
How you doing, Brother Todd? I just wanted to say peace to Brother Todd and Abdullah. How you doing? I just want to say thank you, but also I heard you talk about, this might be a little bit off topic, but I have a letter from the clerk of the court here, which is a corporation, saying that they don't have jurisdiction or delegation of authority, all of that. However, I know you've done a lecture on ultra-virus statutes, and it says an act by a corporation that is beyond its express or implied powers, and how also that they could be sued and dissolved. So a light bulb went in my head, because previously listening to you, I didn't really have a full comprehension of what you're saying. Now I just read it, and I was like, oh, my gosh. So I got like a nuclear bomb here. It's on now. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks for everything you do, Brother Todd. I really appreciate all the Moors on the line. Islam.
Yes, and Islam. And keep in mind, do a portmanteau for them, for all of the individuals, whenever you're talking or making reference to any of the corporate entities, always put the name of the natural person doing business in front of the corporate name. Also, under a portmanteau, go after their bond and their oath, which both go together, including under the discovery, a command for the disclosure of the corporate state from which their home base is located, so that you can put a claim against their bond.
Oh, yes, sir, most definitely. Thank you. I use
All right, you're welcome. Thank you so much, brother, for calling. Have a good night. You know, we're right at 11:37, so it'll probably be good for us to close out. And on part two, I would like to go into a couple of the key articles, and then also to discuss the preliminaries as far as the overall climate as to what was happening right before the signing of the treaty, and then talking about this connection, how it's pulled in regards to the supremacy clause, and then also too about reinforcing the treaty and constitution, et cetera, et cetera. So in closing, Taj and Abdullah, if you provide your closing statement, and then we'll wrap up for the night. Taj, you there?
Islam. Again, so when we come in on the second part, we're going to go in a little bit of the King Alfred plan to show the connection of the people to the land, and then go over the treaty and some of the letters, etc., to make sure their concept is right, and understand why when Drali said to them they're part and parcel of this said government, put it in perspective. And logically is back to understanding the order of the Great Seal. Islam.
Islam. And Abdullah? Abdullah, you there? Okay.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm here. Yes. Now, just want to reiterate once again that the Treaty of Peace and Friendship signed by Sultan, His Imperial Majesty, Sovereign Grand Commander, Warrior Monarch, Imperial Potentate, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, in June 1786, was a great political achievement for the Europeans, as they could not maintain. That was a treaty of permanent peace and friendship, because as they could not maintain the tribute payments. Now, that Treaty of Peace and Friendship began before even going back to the 1600s. As you know, they are English colonies. They're English colonies, and during that time period, the 1600s, 1700s, up into the Treaty of Peace, because you got to connect that. You know, got to look at the Treaty of Peace and Friendship in a broader sense, and going back to the fact that they were English colonies to this very day, and that we were seizing the English colony ships during that time period. And so that recognition actually continued. That political connection was actually birthed during the 1500s with Queen Elizabeth I in 1588, and continued right on down to the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. These political events are connected. So this is how. Just want to reiterate that point, and the study of the treaty in that much broader context of the importance of the treaty for the Europeans is important for us today, in that the Moors, who are classified as Negro-colored black, and that we are being abused in our own land by the European occupiers. So that Treaty of Peace and Friendship and the Constitution are there in place for us to protect our rights. So once again, we'll continue with that and actually address those points that you mentioned next week.
All right. Give thanks. I thank you all for being on. And as everyone knows, the goal of Silver Alert is to be informative, engaging, and third eye opening. And we'll be connecting with you on Tuesday night at 9:30. And then remember, next Thursday will be part 2. So peace and love, everyone, and have a good night.
Peace and love.
Right,
peace and love.
Peace and love, Dr. Abdullah.
Peace and love.
Birdie, spring has sprung! Out with the old, in with the new. Like trading in the big store for Dollar General. You'll get the same big store savings without the big store hassle. And with no hike to the store, you're even closer to the name brands you love. Like fresh, tastic Gain detergent. It's spring in a bottle, people! Stop by Dollar General before Sunday, spend $15 on Gain-scented items, and get $5 off your next trip. Dollar General, it's the fast way to save.